Okay. Thank you, Chair. Congratulations, Farida, for this befitting nomination.
Thank you.
And I really hope that you will be approved to be the CS of Lands.
Thank you.
Now, my concern is related to what the former member has just spoken to, that one of the biggest challenges we are facing today is that our major projects in the country are becoming increasingly expensive when it comes to compensation of the landowners, because you know, the amount at which they want to be compensated are completely unrealistic. And there's certainly a need for a policy to be able to guide the compensation and the pricing of that compensation. And I would want to know what you think from where you sit and what to expect from you in terms of ensuring that we make our, especially the mega projects, less expensive, and that even the compensation process becomes expedited, so that we are able to begin implementation of the same projects in time, so that we don't have unnecessary delays. And again, sitting there as a woman, I would like to know how you intend to protect women who are disinherited of their land when their husbands pass on. And this is very, very common in where we come from. Any member of parliament here will tell you they have had to deal with several women, and not just several, many women who go to them, either their husbands have sold their only piece of land without their knowledge, or they are disinherited of the very land that they are left when their husbands die. They die before them, and so they end up in abject poverty. And this happens in collusion with land officers at the county level. So I would like to know what you think needs to be done to ensure that women are protected in terms of their property rights as per the Constitution.
Well, even as you respond, it's also fair to point out that we know that Article 60 of the Constitution calls for the elimination of gender discrimination in both law, customs, and practices in matters related to land ownership, inheritance, and et al. And that I think the 11th Parliament did address the issue by passing a number of legislation. So, question of implementation, that I think it may be what is lacking. Proceed.
Okay, let me start with the Honorable Chair for Lands. She speaks about deliberate inefficiencies in the Ministry of Lands and asks what we should do to eliminate these inefficiencies. It is true, Mheshimiwa, that some of our processes are highly inefficient. That is true. It is also true that some of it may be deliberate, because the moment you start dealing with physical records, automatically you introduce inefficiency. If you are going to move from the point at which you write a sale agreement, you buy land, you get a deed, you get a title, and each of those processes is manual, that is inefficiency. It takes you a long time to obtain a service that should ideally take you a few days. So I will not tire, but I will insist that the easiest and most effective way to reduce the cost of managing land is to automate these processes. We cannot be continuing in 2018 to transact things on paper when the world has gone digital. We need to transfer most of our processes to digital forms, not just the land transaction processes, even our mapping. I think we need to go to start geomapping. I mean, use technology to map our lands, to draw our beacons. And I think that is work that is already going on in the Ministry of Lands, from the brief I got from the PS. I think there's a lot of work already ongoing to automate most of these systems, to make sure the mapping process is electronic, to make sure the recording process is digital, and all the processes that you need to go through before you own land are actually in digital form. The other thing that the ministry is working on currently is developing a spatial data infrastructure. This way, you're able to, on a computer, tell what is placed where on a map in Kenya. So if you are an investor wanting to invest in Turkana, you don't need to go to look for a physical map of Turkana. You can log onto your computer, see what infrastructure is there. Is there a water line? Is there a power line? Is there internet? All those things is what government is now working on. But of course, it's all good to talk about things saying we are working on. The challenge, or where the rubber meets the road, is actually implementation. It's all good when we talk and we say, oh, you will see Kenya on a map, it's good. But are we going to implement it? I think that if we are committed, and I want to assure you from my briefings before this interview, the government is committed at the highest level possible to making sure that Kenyans have access to land. And they have access to land in a cost-effective manner, in a manner that reduces conflict. So yes, it's a lot of work, it's ongoing, but it's happening and it will happen. And if you do approve my nomination, it is one of the things that I will push very hard, because I don't believe that in this day and age, we should be running manual records for 40 million people. It's an impossible thing to do. To the MP for Pokot South, Order Pokot Singh, how do we make housing affordable? There are different ways, and I'm not an expert in financing. It's just reading up, and I think when we do get to the actual work, we'll get the professionals to do it. But on the face of it, I do think that we need to find ways to make the cost of credit lower. We need to make loans affordable to people at a lower cadre. Currently, there are only, from my information, 24,000 mortgages in a country of 40 million. That's really low. What can we do to make it affordable? The current program of government under this agenda for priority areas is to enable Kenyans to buy a house for the same amount of money they are paying rent. The thinking is, if you can afford to pay rent, and you are told for that amount of money you're using to pay rent, we want you to buy a house, then as government we should be thinking, then what do we need to do to make that possible? So I think we need to look at different financing options that make it possible to access credit at that rate, so that you can pay over a longer period and you live in your house. Instead of paying rent, you're paying rent towards home ownership. We can give incentives to first-time homeowners, because I think one of the challenges we face is many of us are risk averse, and we have this idea that mortgage is risky, don't do it. But if we can assure you that for what you're paying rent, you can buy your house, I think it would be possible to build houses at a lower rate. The National Housing Corporation should also be enabled to give loans to rural Kenyans. I think they used to do it a while back. I don't know what happened. But if you're in a rural area and you're given a loan of 2 million, you can build a good house. So I think we need to enable the National Housing Corporation to support Kenyans to get loans to own homes and give them a longer period to pay, so that it's not strenuous. Financing options can be worked out with government. The other way to lower the cost of land is, of course, to make the price of land predictable. You know, the price of land in Kenya is not predictable, especially for projects, and that is what Honorable Cecily Mbarire was asking. I am aware that the Ministry of Lands is working on a land value index, so that if you're coming to invest in Nairobi, you know that if I go and buy land in Embakasi, this is what I expect to pay. If I go to buy land in Kajiado, this would be the price. So it is, I think, important that we fast track this process of creating an index for the value of land, so that Kenyans, or so that public projects especially, are not expensive. Because what happens is, the moment Kenyans know that a railway is going to pass through my neighborhood, it's speculation. The price becomes 3 times what is the normal price is. But if you create an index and you know that this is the price and it's not going to go up, if it does, it will be by a small margin, I think then we'll be able to manage the cost of land for public projects. So let's, my priority would then be to work with the ministry to finalize this land value index, and maybe avail a bill before Parliament if it's not already there. I'm not sure of the details, but I know the ministry is working on an index. I'm aware that there's a pilot project in, I think, Mombasa and Bomet, to see how it's going to work. So these are some of the programs that we need to experiment on and see how quickly it will turn around in terms of lowering the cost of land. For Honorable Cecily, you talked about, I think I've answered the compensation question. We just need to fix the price of land. It can't be that it's not predictable. It needs to be predictable for the price to be manageable for government. Regarding how to make sure women are not disinherited, I think there are some pieces of legislation already, the Matrimonial Properties Act. I think that the implementation is not as good as it should be. I think that the communities also need to be, we need to keep talking to our communities and to our women. We can't assume that people know that it's 2018 and they should know that a woman has a right to own land. We have to keep talking about these things, and we have to keep engaging the institutions responsible for enforcing these laws. Because you said it yourself, as a woman you have to fight for your space. Nobody's going to give it to you on a silver platter. So I think as women leaders, we must come together. We must help our women at the grassroots to appreciate that they have rights, that it is within their rights and they can actually own that land. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very well.